One. Mark, hello, good morning.
And a fine good morning to you. We've eventually got some warm sunshine creeping into our lives up here in Gauteng because we
Right.
were beginning to think that we weren't going to have a summer. Okay, so we're not allowed
Okay.
to talk about weather and we're not allowed to talk about Springboks, except they did yet again yawn, win the Blitzbook tournament in Cape Town. But it was quite an exciting good morning, everybody. Lots to talk about. Tim,
Okay, so and I
you've
know
been
we're not allowed to
traveling.
talk about the weather, but I would like
Yeah.
to talk about the heat because I've been traveling and I was in Dubai and it's midwinter and it's hotter than it is here.
Yeah, exactly. What's the deal, man? Yeah. And lots of parking. So
Exactly.
you wrote a piece about Dubai. It was very interesting. It's a fabulous melting pot and mixture of things. What's your summary version for us on the podcast this morning?
I quite like it, and I'm very glad that I'm unfashionable about that because
Mm,
snobby people don't like Dubai because it's like
yeah,
fake and it's concrete and glass. It's all concrete
yeah.
and glass. It's just a it's and here's the pun
Money.
coming.
Yeah,
It's many and it's a city built on sand
yeah.
because that's
Ooh,
point.
all sorts of
Yeah,
innuendo
it's
there.
got a
Yeah,
double
yeah,
meaning and all of that sort of stuff.
yeah,
But I have to say, people think of it as a sort of fantasy, a kind of like sort of money fantasy. But it's I just can't, I think you just can't deny ambition. If somebody gets up and
yeah,
says, I'm going to build, a fantastic new city right here in the middle of the desert where it is hotter than Cape Town in midwinter, most people would say you're nuts. But then they
yeah,
went ahead and did it. And how are you not impressed by that? Why is
yeah.
that not in itself something to respect? Whether or not you like the
Well,
city, that's your own choice. But the
yeah.
ambition, I love.
The root issue to discuss is, can you create demand? Okay. And you can.
Yes.
Okay, they
Okay.
created a destination. Okay, that's the root issue. They
Yes.
created demand, and airlines started rerouting to give people an overnight or 5 hour stop there to go shopping. And no doubt they've
Yes.
got tax advantages and all sorts of other things, and they're in the middle of the world a little bit, middle of the East
Right.
sort of world. And so they created demand, okay, out of
Right.
excess capital. And that's a
Yes.
fascinating concept because one always thinks, well,
That's true.
where's the demand? Can you create it? And they did. Yeah,
Yes.
I've never
No,
been
that's
there
true. And
because you know
oh,
why I won't
okay.
go there? Because I
Why?
won't go there because it's all glass and cement and it's built on sand, for goodness
Okay.
sake.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes,
where's the
yes, yes.
view already? Where's the sea? Where's the animals? Come on, Tim.
I must say,
No,
I have to tell you, the view is absolutely incredible because the Burj Khalifa now it's now been the world's tallest building for a decade. No one's
mm,
overtaken it for a decade. I always
mm,
assumed A, that there's nobody in it. You know what I mean? That it's just a
a
fantasy, and
monument
B,
to
yeah,
capitalism.
and
Yeah.
B, that it was a financial disaster. So it
Mm,
turns out both of those things are wrong. They have round about 7 million people go to the top of the Burj Khalifa every year, and they all pay $50. And if you just do a little kind of sum of about that, it's a lot of money. The point is that they paid off the cost of building the thing after it had been up for 4 years. It was a fantastically sound financial investment, which I think is great. I think it's great when, it's as you say, that what they did was they created this tall building. People come to the city, they look at this very impressive building, they want to go to the top, they pay a little bit of cash, and the building is
well,
paid for. And it
okay.
doesn't matter whether they don't sell a single office to a single commercial or residential client.
Okay, Tim, we've
We,
got it. It's heaven on earth, this Dubai thing. You need to get out a bit more, Tim. Okay, we've got it. Okay, we're all going to go to Dubai for our summer holidays. Anyway, what the real question is, what could we do here? Okay, because we've got so many other natural advantages over and being built on sand. So that would be a challenge. But the trouble with our country and all of pervasively across SOEs, across government, across private sector in some cases is debt. Debt and debtors are, to me,
yes,
the prevailing wind. I was fascinated to read this morning that Eskom's profitability has gone from minus 55 billion to plus 16 billion. That's quite a turnaround. Okay, so I started saying to
yes,
myself, how on earth did they do that? And have they made adequate provisions, for example, bad debts, given that
right.
they are owed 105 billion? Okay, so now I'm saying this.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm saying this, that underlying a whole lot of our financial reporting, particularly as it relates to government institutions, is an inadequate provision for bad debts, okay, which would
Yes.
wipe out all the profitability, okay. And
Yes.
and our indebtedness grows, and we seem to be enthused by the fact that every time we issue new debt, it's oversubscribed. It's because it's government guaranteed and it's a very high yield. And the high yield is there because of the risk. Anyway, I'm worried about debt.
Things
We
about
must
debt.
never forget that when you are
Right.
in debt, you're not owned by the shareholders, you're owned by the creditors. Okay.
Right.
You work when you owe money, you're owned by the people that you owe money to. And we are a country that is owned by our creditors and we are not being paid by our debtors. It's an
Can I ask you a
extraordinary
question?
phenomenon. Yeah,
Can I ask you a question about that? Do you think that our problem with debt is because we are generating too little demand,
of
or
course.
that we are over capitalizing? Are we being too
No,
ambitious, or are we being not ambitious enough? Is another way of saying the same thing, right?
not ambitious enough, unquestionably, because the biggest line
Okay.
in the income statement is revenue. Okay, you've got to have revenue. Okay, and
Right.
so I don't think we've done enough capital investment. Look at all of the unemployment. And the reason that people aren't paying. And the reason why we've got an enormous, it runs into hundreds of billions individual debt to service providers in South Africa. It's because we're not getting the service, and we're not getting the service because we haven't invested in infrastructure and repair and transport alternatives and so on. I read the other day also that the taxis have finally been kicked out of Fourways Mall and they're having a fit
Right.
about it, the taxi association. But if you can hardly drive through Sandton anymore, it is one big
Yes.
taxi park. Okay, and so that's because the railways aren't there working. And so I say
Yes.
that the problem is absence of investment, not overinvestment or unwise investment. We just haven't invested. We haven't
Yes.
invested. Now, I can't think of a massive capital project in the last decade. Can you?
No, I know. You know what I think we should do, and this has just occurred to me now, is I think we should build a very tall building that
Here
people can
is
look
on
out.
sand in the Karoo.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we'll show them. Yeah, or in
Yeah.
Namibia. Yeah. No, okay, Tim, you've got the airtime on this Dubai thing. Are you on a commission or something? You must be.
No.
Okay. Anyway, and so you go
Um,
a little bit further into the capital markets. And I see
right.
we're losing another two big companies on the stock market. MultiChoice and Barlow World, I think, delist this week or thereabouts. And
Oh,
I
that's right.
wonder whether the JSE has got old and stale. I wonder whether, with all the new technology and with all the access to trading platforms and things of that nature, whether the time for a rewrite is upon us. And I would venture a guess that it is, in terms of
But you know,
liquidity, in terms of governance, in terms of regulatory compliance, in terms of all of the old fashioned, clogged up stuff that is still there in the JSE question mark. And no doubt I'm going to get some responses to this. Yeah.
the first thing is that the JSEs that's currently at a record, so you can't really say that, and substantial records. The second thing is that it's up about 35% over the year. From that perspective, you can hardly say that this is a failed organization. Maybe
Sorry.
what
The
they're doing is
JSE,
they're getting rid of the sort of weakest players, and we are concentrating on the team with potential rather than the team that doesn't have potential.
sorry, we're talking at cross purposes here. The success of the JSE is not the same
Yes,
as the success of the participants in the JSE. I mean, I can tell you some private unlisted companies that are massively successful have got nothing to do with the JSE. The
right.
markets and the performance of the component participants in the markets is not a judge, or it might be partially, but it's certainly not the judge of whether the place where they listed is as good as it could be. And I'm telling you that I think we can choose to differ there, and we can see what other people
Well,
think.
sure, but it's not South Africans don't have options because we always thought that the problem with the JSE was that it was a kind of it was this monopoly. Now
Yeah.
it's not a monopoly anymore. There's two other stock exchanges out there. They do different things. They seem to be doing okay, but they certainly haven't gone head to head with the JSE. The people still like the JSE. So
Well,
the
I'm going to watch this space because I'm thinking about it.
okay,
So
okay,
watch this space is what I've got to say. Talk about failing and succeeding.
right,
I tweeted the following on Friday. There's been this debate in Parliament about the 30% pass mark and whether it should be changed or
right,
moved or whatever, and it was decided to keep it. So you can
okay,
get 30% for certain subjects in amongst a more complicated discussion, and you can
right,
still get a pass of sorts. Okay. And so I treat it, if you get 30% right and 70% wrong, how come that can be a pass? Okay, which I thought was a fairly simple question. Okay. That
Okay,
thing,
but
that little sentence has got 140 odd thousand views so far, and a lot
okay,
more opinions than I've had on anything I've ever said. Okay. And
okay,
to be fair on everyone that commented, the issue was more complex than I thought about. The issue
okay,
was, and I don't think the solution or even the debate has anything to do with the pass mark. It has to do with our education system being so narrowly focused that we no longer have technicons and nursing colleges and places where matric doesn't matter, but your skill set
right,
can accommodate you and build you a job. And so I'm going to argue, and I'll probably write about this, that we need to rethink the streaming, the channeling, and the foundations of our skills and aptitudes into a new formula for career opportunities. And that shouldn't be so focused on tertiary and secondary qualifications as we currently understand them. Because nowadays, PhDs are like 10 a penny, but and they don't get you a
right,
job. Okay. Anyway, so
right.
I opened a bit of a hornet's nest there, and I do stand a bit accused of not fully understanding what I'm saying. And so maybe a bit of clarity there. But it's a very interesting subject.
So
What do you
just
think? Is 30% a
why?
pass, Tim?
No, what I recognize is that the actual pass rate is arbitrary because, in effect, when you're at school, you are competing against your peers, and you can set that point, the pass point, wherever you want. You could set the pass point at 70%, but then you just
Why do
make
you
the
say that? Why do you say
you
that?
could,
We all
because then
write
you
the
could just
same
make
exam,
the
give or take.
yeah, you just make
Exam
the
is
exam
supposed to.
simpler. If you make the
Oh,
exam
yeah, but
simpler, then everybody
yeah,
will move up. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
maybe the
yeah.
problem is not the pass mark. The problem is the quality of what you are being taught. And you know that, and that is the other aspect of it. Is the we assume that the problem is that our education system is gone awry, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just we have terrible teachers. Maybe it's not the
Well,
system's
we
fault
have
here.
challenges. We have, to use a
Right.
politician term, we've got some challenges. For example, how many kids are being taught in their mother tongue? It's a big issue. And some of the comments I got were, Mark, if I made this comment in my home tongue, you wouldn't understand it. No, I get that point. Another
Yes,
comment
yes,
was
no, this is
made,
true.
what are you going to do? Are you going to just let people stay in the school system forever so that you have 21, 22-year-olds that still haven't got through the school system? We've got to find a method. So I'm saying,
Right.
change track, change mindset on this thing. Stop focusing on that point as I wrongly did, and start thinking about early recognition of differential measures of employability, if I could call it that, which is one of the purposes and of education. So it's a fascinating
Oh,
debate,
that's
which
a
I
very good
opened for
point. Yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah.
And
The
let's think about that.
yeah.
So we're two-thirds of the way through this podcast, and you haven't asked me a question that I can't answer yet. That's all I'm
Oh,
saying.
that's true. I haven't.
Yeah. So
Mark, can
help
I ask you
yourself.
a
Yeah.
question? Can I ask you a question you probably won't know the answer to?
Yes.
So here is the question. The question is that if you take the top 50 companies on the planet Earth by revenue, and then you look at those 50 companies' profit margin, what company do you think is making the most money as a percentage margin at the net level? So this is
So
after tax and everything.
that is a question simplified almost to the point of absurdity. Okay, because
Okay.
yeah, it depends on how far they are in their development curve. Okay, have they got over the economic contribution point of? So the biggest margins are
So are you,
probably
Mark?
in technology.
Are you saying you don't
Okay.
know? Is that where we're down to?
Look, but I'm allowed to make a movie of saying I don't know. Okay, and this is my
Okay.
movie.
Okay.
It depends. The biggest margin is when your input
Right.
costs are zero and you can charge a fortune. So that would be natural resource companies, oil
Right.
companies, things
Right.
of that nature. But then when you
Yes.
cross the break-even point in technological development, you just make it rains money. So, Tim,
Yes.
I'm going to summarize all I've said up to now and say the following. I don't know, Tim.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
So
answer
tell
is
me.
obviously you're heading in the right direction as one would expect when one talks to somebody
Yeah.
as knowledgeable as you. But it's not quite as simple as you think because here is how it works.
Ah,
Nvidia
here we
is
go. Yeah, you're going to talk
the
about
most
NVIDIA
profitable.
versus the
The
Persian Gulf now. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most profitable company of the 50 largest companies by revenue is Nvidia. But here's the profit margin. Their net profit margin, 57%. Sorry, 53.7%. That is amazing, don't you think? Yeah, no, of
Second.
course.
Who
Yeah.
came second?
Okay. The second is Visa.
Visa.
Does that surprise you? Visa, the card provider.
No, because
Um,
it's the economics of an installed base. Okay. At the
right,
margin, I imagine the cost of a new visa applicant is practically zero, and the
right,
revenue stream is there for free. I'm involved in a company where we've crossed over on that point, okay? And
right.
so the cost of a new client acquisition is tending towards zero, and the revenues therefore always
Zero.
all goes to the bottom line.
Right.
That's a magic point of inflection, which is
Yes.
achieved by called economies of scale. And in the
No, no, that's right.
technological world today, economies
Right.
of scale are international and unlimited.
Yes.
And then you know what happens though, Tim? And then a
Right.
competitor comes along because it's so
Yes.
juicy. Okay. And so then along
Well, this
comes
is
a
what I think.
competitor.
If Nvidia is so profitable,
Yeah,
I now understand why investors are so keen on all of these
yeah,
small fintech companies, because they're
yeah.
looking at this and they're thinking we could get a part of that, and if we got a very small part of that, we would be doing really well. Okay, so there's one
So
other thing
so
point that I wanted
first
to make.
first you get the
Uh,
copiers and then you get the eliminators. Okay. So everyone jumps on the
yes,
bandwagon and blah blah blah. And then someone comes along and goes, here's a new way of doing this. Okay. And they then make the big money. And that's how the cycle works. For example, like Starlink now, whatever they call themselves. I'm going to launch a cell phone that has nothing to do with networks. Okay, so
yes,
wherever you are on the planet, you just go straight to the satellite. Okay. Now
yes,
that's going to have, I imagine, a few network companies scratching their heads about their aerial coverage and
yes,
all
yes,
that kind of
yes,
stuff.
yes,
So that's the beauty of it. These huge margins
yes,
attract brain power and capital,
yeah.
and that creates competition and innovation. And so it's a good thing, Tim. And you must eat while you're still in front.
So the last point that I wanted to make about this, at the risk of being really
Mm.
boring, is that I thought would be making super profits would be the oil companies, right? Because they have been the world's biggest companies for 20 years or something like that. And then Saudi Arabia's lift is around about $15. But they are just, you would think they are pouring out money. They
Yeah.
are, except that their net profit margin is only 21%. And the other big petrol companies, they're really on small margins.
But petrol
ExxonMobil has
companies are
now,
different from oil. They're completely different economic models. Okay. Distribution is not the
yes,
same as origination. Now, the joy of oil, okay, is that the way you manage supply and demand is how wide you turn open the tap because it's coming out of the
yes,
ground
yes,
at a hell of a rate. And it's not
right.
like gold that you have to go and find or product that you have to invent and test and get. It just comes at you and you go, okay, do you want to put the price up? Switch the tap off a bit there, but will you? Okay, and then it gets in short supply, but then and again there'll be alternative sources of energy. It's all of these. This is what makes the world go round, Tim. This very
Yes,
series of phenomena that we are discussing here and the
but
magic of investment is to
yes,
discover the characteristics of potential investment that
right.
lend towards this kind of profitability, this kind of economic model, and invest in those. Okay. And try, if you're very clever or lucky, more
Right.
likely, you'll get them at the right point in their development cycle before value is discovered and before competition has arrived. There's my investment advice for the week for your
Okay.
Christmas bonus. Okay. Take that, sports lovers. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I can't
Now,
leave this alone. I beg your pardon, but there's one
no,
other
carry
point
on.
that I wanted to
Please don't tell me you're going to talk about
make.
Dubai now.
No, no, no.
We've
No,
had
no, no. This
Dubai
is
in
the relief we've
spades.
done Dubai. No, no. It's just the other thing that I think is so interesting is just quite how much these very big companies are making. They are
Yeah.
making fortunes, and that must be having an effect on other companies down the line. I've been looking at margins for a long time now, and these
Mm.
margins look very big to me.
They do.
It shocks me when a company makes a margin of over 10%. Because if a company is making a margin of over 10%, I think that there's a competition problem. And you can see this in these numbers because actually the areas where there is big competition, which is at the retail level, the margins are very small. So Walmart,
You
for
know,
example,
yeah.
margin of 3%. They make a margin of
Yeah,
3%.
I don't know.
Incredible, eh?
I was going to say, why would they come here into what is already a really competitive, thin margin business of retail? It really
Yeah,
is. The margins there are single digit margins, low single digit margins. I don't know, but it's about a couple of things, Tim, this phenomenon and how long it persists. Some of it is natural IQ, if I can call it, intellectual property and development and attracting all of that stuff and continued innovation. The other thing
right,
is regulatory interference or protection. So you have
right.
these things functioning in a bubble that
Yep,
that is which is not open to competition. But in a free market, in a perfectly free market with perfectly free capital flows, these things will have a natural life which is long enough for them to harvest and short enough because the next development, which is for the betterment of all customers, comes into play.
right.
Yeah, you should write a thesis on it, Tim, man. Come on.
Yes. Yeah, judging by how much I've gone on and on about it. I think
No,
I
no,
spoke
no.
about this more than I spoke about Dubai. So that's the good
No,
part.
it's neck and neck. If you that last mention of Dubai might have taken the race. Yeah. Have a
Oh,
good
damn
week,
it.
people. It's nearly Christmas, nearly
Cheers,
holidays.
everyone. Look after yourselves.
Cheers, cheers.
Drive
Okay.
carefully.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.